About 1919, the discovery of Lord Dunsany gave a vast impetus to my weird writing, and I turned out material in greater volume than ever before or since.
Dunsany could deploy a sentence and conjure up old gods in whom you would believe, and they'd been there for 15,000 years, and they had ironies and stuff like that, and Lovecraft was trying.
In some way, he admired the British, regarded the British as being a little higher plane, I don't know. So, I mean, he never, to my knowledge, got in touch with Dowson and Blackwood, whom he greatly admired, or he did see Lord Dunsany speak, but he never corresponded with him.
The death of my mother on May 24th gave me an extreme nervous shock. She was a person of unusual charm and force of character. I shall not again be likely to meet with a mind so thoroughly admirable.
His mother had died as a result of a botched gallbladder operation that she had had in 1921. So far as we can tell, she herself had a kind of love-hate relationship with her own son. Affected by what happened to her husband, she raised Lovecraft, I think, in a very excessively puritanical manner. Sex, of course, was never discussed. She even once referred to Lovecraft as hideous, that he had a hideous face. And you can tell the moment Lovecraft's mother died, his health started to improve. All these nervous ailments that he used to have were sloughed off, and he began living.
My one venture into matrimony ended in the divorce court for reasons 98% financial. But if one expects to be a man of letters, one has to sacrifice something.
It's often been said that Sonia was a kind of mother replacement, and to be honest, there is a good bit of truth to that. He did meet Sonia for the first time only 6 weeks after his mother had died. It's clear that Sonia pursued him. She came to Providence as often as her business interests would permit. She took Lovecraft on various trips throughout New England. She persuaded Lovecraft to come to New York. In a sense, Lovecraft was looking for someone to sort of take care of him the way his mother did. And I don't think he was really emotionally ready for what a marriage involved.
To give the devil his due, New York is a fine place to visit, but only to visit. Its tall buildings, seen from a distance, are an exquisite picture, and its museums, bookstalls, and general facilities are very convenient for occasional consultation. But to try to live there?
Lovecraft lived in New York for 2 years during his marriage to Sonia Green. The city's cosmopolitan flavor and ethnic diversity didn't sit well with his ever-present xenophobia. On top of this, he was unable to find steady work. And in May of 1925, his apartment here at 169 Clinton Street was broken into and he was robbed. It wasn't long before he was back to his beloved Providence.
Something unwholesome, something furtive, something vast lying subterraneally in obnoxious slumber. That was the soul of 169 Clinton Street. In Providence are all the elements which appeal most poignantly to my spirit, with its joint love of beauty and antiquity. The old town dreams on 7 green hills at the head of its lovely blue bay, crowned by great domes and venerable steeples, and preserving unchanged a vast proportion of the narrow, winding hill streets, the peaked colonial gables and gambrel rooftops, the exquisitely carved classic doorways with double flights of iron-railed steps, and the stately Georgian mansions in their archaic walled gardens, which made it splendid and colorful at the time of the Revolution. What I had seen every night since I left it now stood before me in prosaic reality, precisely the same, line for line, detail for detail, proportion for proportion. Simply I was home, and home was just as it had always been since I was born there 36 years ago. There is no other place for me. My world is Providence.
his love of the past impelled him to worship his own native city of Providence and to seek out other realms, antiquarian oases throughout the East Coast, up and down the East Coast, all the way from Quebec down to Key West, Florida. He loved the town of Charleston, South Carolina. He loved Richmond, all the old towns up on the East Coast.
At the time, I had no thought or hope of professional publication, but the founding of Weird Tales in 1923 opened up an outlet of considerable steadiness. My stories of the 1920 period reflect a good deal of my two chief models, Poe and Dunsany, and are in general too strongly inclined to extravagance and overcoloring to be of much serious literary value.
Some weird fiction is not horror fiction, and certainly some horror fiction is not weird. I mean, you know, clearly a contemporary example might be Thomas Harris. I mean, Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal in particular are clearly horror novels. I mean, Hannibal is very much a gothic horror novel with a Dracula-style monster in the person of Hannibal Lecter. But the crucial difference is there's nothing remotely supernatural about him. I mean, he's a human monster. And so clearly that is horror that is not in any way fantastic. Equally, you know, some of Clark Ashton Smith, and certainly a lot of Lord Dunsany, can be classed as weird fiction. But although there's an undercurrent of the macabre, it's fair to say that the primary effect of the story is not to horrify. It's more to awe, or to give you a sense of, you know, this sort of jeweled, crystalline, fantastic otherwhere.
He knew that in the town of Providence there were not very many people on his intellectual level, or at least those who shared his interests in weird fiction, in philosophy, in history, and in all the other subjects that he was interested in. Almost by osmosis, he gathered a band of correspondents from around the country and possibly even overseas who did share these interests and who could write very interesting letters in response to his own.
Well, I mean, I guess the Lovecraft Circle was a group of writers who were influenced by Lovecraft either by his enthusiasm, in the case of, you know, people like Clark Ashton Smith, Robert E. Howard, with whom he corresponded and whom he greatly admired, or also younger writers with whom he corresponded and gave some sort of critical help to. So Robert Bloch, he sent a long letter detailing what he thought could be improved, a story called Satan's Servants. August Derleth, he gave lots of advice to. And the last of all, Fritz Leiber, who briefly corresponded with Lovecraft and who clearly shaped Leiber's attitude to horror fiction as a branch of literature.
May not all mankind be a mistake, an abnormal growth like a wart on the human hand? Might not the total destruction of humanity as well as all animate creation be a positive boon to nature as a whole?
It seems as if he adopted a view that the universe is a mechanism, kind of a machine that runs automatically without the guidance of a deity. At the same time, he realized that we don't know everything there is to know about the universe and never will. Our sensory limitations will always close us off from understanding the universe totally. And his weird fiction was meant to probe those areas of the universe where anything might happen. And I think that's what he was getting at in a lot of his fiction.